Were classical philologists like Hans Krahe right when they suggested that long ago Europe once spoke a single language? And if they were, could that language have been Slavic? One Slavic word may offer us a clue, and that word is lug. Lugano, Switzerland. Lugan, France. Lugo, Spain. Lugo, Italy. 4 countries, different languages. And yet all these names contain the same striking element. Lug. Lug. There is just one problem, because lug is also a Slavic word. In Serbian, lug means a grove, or wooded area, and names built from this word appear throughout the Slavic world. In Russian, lug means meadow, while similar words with closely related meanings are found throughout other Slavic languages. So what is lug doing in Switzerland, France, Italy, and Spain? Coincidence? Latin? Celtic? Or are we looking at something much older? Today we follow one tiny word across Europe, and we begin in Switzerland. Lugano. Lugano lies in southern Switzerland, near the Italian border. In Italian, the city is called Lugano, but in the local Lombard language, Lugan. And here things immediately become interesting, because the origin of the name is uncertain. Among the proposed explanations is the Latin word Lucus, meaning a grove, particularly a sacred grove. Another proposed explanation connects Lugano with the Celtic god Lugus. But stop there for a moment. Latin, Lucus, grove. Serbian, lug, grove. Not only do the words resemble each other, their meanings do too. And more than 200 years ago, one remarkable Serbian intellectual noticed precisely this connection. His name was Pavle Solaric. And Solaric was no obscure amateur. Educated in philosophy and law, he became a linguist, geographer, writer, translator, and one of the important intellectual figures of the Serbian Enlightenment. Then, in 1818, he published a remarkable work, Rimljani Slavenstwovavshii, a title that can be rendered in English as The Romans of Slavic Origin. And the argument was extraordinary. Solaric examined origin of 700 Latin words in Slavic languages, particularly Serbian vocabulary. Among the comparisons he discussed was precisely the one before us. Latin Lucus, Serbian Lug. Modern historical linguistics does not accept Solaric's broader conclusions as established fact. But the linguistic resemblance he noticed is real. Lucus, lug. And now it takes us much further west, to France. Southern France contains not one, but 2 places called Lugan. One in Aveyron, another in Tarn. And now the explanation changes, because the name has also been associated with the Celtic linguistic world. That introduces another ancient word, Lugus, the name of a major Celtic deity. Suddenly we have 3 forms, Slavic, Lug, Latin, Lucus, Celtic, Lugus. 3 linguistic worlds, 3 remarkably similar forms. But are they actually related? Not necessarily, and this distinction is important. Similar words do not automatically have the same origin, but they certainly give us something worth investigating, especially when we discover what happens farther west. Travel to Galicia in northwestern Spain. There we find the ancient city of Lugo. Its Roman name is well documented, Lucus Augusti. The ancient Lucus Augusti is identified with modern Lugo in Spanish heritage sources. Latin Lucus can mean a sacred grove. So Lucus Augusti can be interpreted as the sacred grove of Augustus. Straightforward enough. However, we cannot be certain about the pre-Roman name. The most common explanation is that an indigenous name based on Lug, Lugu, may already have existed, which the Romans later rendered or reinterpreted as Lucus. Spanish heritage sources also note a possible connection between the place name and the pre-Roman god Lug. So, once again, we find Lug, exactly as preserved in the modern name of the place. For one more time, we encounter the same puzzle, Lucus, Lug, Lugus, and it leaves another question. If the form lug is older than Luke, why has lug survived to the present day? Spanish is a Romance language, so why would Spanish revive an ancient pre-Roman name? And Spain isn't the end of the journey. Go east again, back across the Mediterranean, to Italy. And there we find places called Lugo. Again, one of them is Lugo di Vicenza in northern Italy. And once again, the traditional explanation takes us back to Latin lucus, a grove, a wood, a sacred wooded place. So put the map together. Switzerland, Lugano. France, Lugan. Spain, Lugo. Italy, Lugo. And now look east, because here the pattern explodes. In Serbia we have Lug, Lugovo, Lugare, Mali Mokri Lug, Veliki Mokri Lug. And forms based on Lug occur across the wider Slavic world. Here lies perhaps the most interesting difference. For modern speakers of Western European languages, names such as Lugo or Lugano generally require historical etymology to explain them. But for a Serbian speaker, Lug is still a word. You don't need an ancient inscription to recognize it. You can find it in the language and on the map. So, who borrowed from whom? This is where we have to resist the easiest conclusion. The existence of Lugano, Lugan and Lugo does not prove that Slavs founded these places. Nor does similarity alone prove that Latin Lucus, Celtic Lugus, and Slavic lug are the same word. There is another possibility, and perhaps it is even more fascinating. What if we are looking at remnants of much older European linguistic layers? Layers older than modern France, older than modern Italy, older than modern Serbia, and perhaps older than the historical categories we instinctively use when looking at the European map. Because modern borders can be deceptive. France was not always French-speaking. Spain was not always Spanish-speaking. Italy contained many languages before Italian existed, but geographical names can survive all of them, sometimes for thousands of years. However, two things we know for sure. First, place names based on the root, Lucus, are hardly found anywhere across the Slavic world, while those based on lug can apparently be found throughout Western Europe. Second, as a place name, lug has a clear and logical meaning only in modern Slavic languages. This is precisely where the conventional Indo-European explanation of the phenomenon begins to fall short. So perhaps the wrong question is, did Slavs name Lugano? We cannot demonstrate that. The better question is, how old is lug? Because across Europe we encounter lug, Lucus, Lugus, Lugan, Lugano, Lugo, sometimes connected with groves, sometimes with sacred places, sometimes with Celtic tradition, and in the Slavic world with a word that remains alive. More than 2 centuries ago, Pavle Solaric believed such similarities pointed toward a much deeper relationship between the ancient languages of Europe and Slavic. Modern linguistics is considerably more cautious, and so are we. But one thing cannot be disputed. The names are there, the words are there, and the similarities are there. So what exactly are we looking at? Coincidence? Borrowing? Ancient Indo-European inheritance? And if that is the case, why does that Indo-European prevail in Slavic Europe? If this is not the case, if these words are indeed of Celtic or Latin origin, then how do we explain the abundance of place names containing the root lug throughout the Slavic world, extending far into Eastern Asia? We know that neither the Romans nor the Celts ever inhabited those regions. Were Hans Krahe and Pavle Solaric right? You decide. But remember, this was only one word. Now imagine what happens when instead of one word, we examine thousands of geographical names. And that takes us to Greece. So, click on the link and watch that episode, because the map may remember far more than history books do.